Let's get a look at these.
Any Germans?
They're too bright, I can't see.
He's moving fast! Fly full around!
Everybody keep calm, we're gonna take care of this.
Shut him down! They're coming back! Fly full around them! Chester's going down! She's breaking up! Going down! Get it
This is Red Ice Creations Radio. Greetings to new or regular listeners. My name is Henrik Palmgren and we are recording from the west coast of Sweden. Wherever you are, a warm welcome to the program. The website is redicecreations.com, our home on the web, where you can find our radio archives, our member section, news, links, resources and much more. And soon we are going to do our first live program. We are still storing out a few technical details, but much more is to come, so stay tuned. We'll soon be up and running. Today we are going to dive into the topics of UFOs and talk about the fascinating subject of Foo Fighters, balls of fire, ghost rockets and whatnot. We're going to focus on the period in and around the Second World War. We have Keith Cheter joining us today, and he is the author to the book Strange Company, Military Encounters with UFOs in World War II. I'm going to have all the links up on our information page on Red Ice Creations with related articles and links to how you can find the book and much more, so you can continue reading from there and on all the topics that we'll be discussing here today. So take a look at redicecreations.com for much more on that. Okay, so it's going to be very interesting today diving into these subjects together with Keith. We're glad he's joined us here today. So welcome to the program, Keith. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Henrik. It's a real pleasure and honor to be on your show. I'm glad you invited me on.
Excellent. Yeah, it's nice to have you. Thank you again for coming on. As we usually do when we have a new guest on the program, before we kind of dive into the main topic of today's program, where I would like to spend some time to talk a little bit about your background and interest when it comes to this subject in regards to UFOs. Then, when did this start for you, and was there any kind of specific event, I guess, in your life that kind of got you into this research?
Yes, the year was around 1966. I live on the east coast of the United States in the state of Maryland. It was a daytime sighting. I was living along the Catoctin mountain line, and so the mountains were behind me, but it was full daylight, I guess the summer, around 5:30 p.m., and I was running down my front yard, and I looked across the field, which was several hundred yards away, and there was a tree line, and above those trees I saw a large, round, orangish red ball, just motionless, hanging above the trees. Now, I was 11 years old, so my hand at full extension could encompass and hold it like a basketball. So I wasn't sure if it was huge and very close or far away. I wasn't sure at the time. All I know is that it scared me. I ran inside my neighbor's house to get my friend. We came back out, and it was gone. It was a clear sky. There was no wind. And I, was alarmed. I told my parents, and they listened to my story. But, after it was all over, I continued on with the day. But later in the week, my mother said to me, that thing you saw, they were saying on the news that there were weather balloon sightings. So even as a child, I realized that was no weather balloons, because I had seen so much aerial activity. I lived out in the country. Mm-hmm. And it was fairly desolate. Biplanes would come out and practice their aerobatics for shows. I would see lots of helicopter activity because the Vietnam War was in full swing, or getting ready to. And I was fairly close to Camp David. I lived probably 30 minutes from Camp David along the mountain line. Mm-hmm. So to see the presidential helicopters come over my house was a fairly normal observation.
Sure.
Whatever this was, I still do not believe it was a weather balloon, for one. It just did not resemble, it was a solid, like I said, orange-red ball. So that was in 1969, 1966. And so I had an interest throughout, and occasionally would read all the books that would come out during those years. And by 1989, I started to take on the role of investigations. I had come across a friend who was in high school in 1987, and an English teacher of their class had spoken about knowing about UFOs. And I say it was in relationship to all the hubbub of activity over Roswell. Roswell started coming out in the press around that time. And the teacher figured since the press was releasing information, she felt comfortable in speaking with it to her class. Her story was that in the year 1969, she worked for CETA. She was employed by CETA, which was a civilian employment training agency for people who were going to college to give them jobs during the summer to help pay for school. Her job was to work in the Pentagon for the Office of Civil Defense, and she was a secretary to an Army Colonel, Sullivan. Now, her office was very small. It was herself and Colonel Sullivan. And one day during that summer, there was a meeting within Colonel Sullivan's office, and she could not help but overhear other officers, she believed they were all Army, were discussing what they should do with the remains of a UFO. And she tried her best not to listen, but could not miss that information. So later on that summer, something happened at the Office of Civil Defense, a library. Something was broken into. There was a real scandal that took place. And she became under investigation by the FBI, her family and friends, and it scared her. So she never really spoke much more about her employment there until, of course, this incident. So I decided to try to find out exactly what it was she heard for myself, and before doing so, I contacted Leonard Stringfield, who was a well-known crash and retrieval specialist at the time. Of course, he had a long history involved with UFOs.
Right.
His going back to the World War II. So when I called Mr. Stringfield out of the blue, I asked him if he wouldn't mind helping guide me in approaching this person and give me some tips on interview techniques, so I didn't scare her off or I didn't lead with any kind of questions.
Sure.
And he was more than glad to. We became fast friends from that moment on. And so that was how it directly put me in connection to Mr. Stringfield. And from there, of course, I had known about Mr. Stringfield's World War II sighting. But during the course of our friendship, I heard him speak about the observation, of course, on the telephone to me, and it was fascinating. And I became more fascinated with the subject because I had an interest in World War II. So one thing led to another, and I decided to, by 1999, go into full-time research regarding World War II. In honor of Mr. Stringfield's sighting, because I felt that it was so fascinating, there had to be more. So what I had to figure out first was what kind of material existed, what was out there regarding World War II that was available to the general public. And there was a lot. Here and there would be magazine articles. A lot of the older books would devote a chapter, a paragraph or two, sometimes a chapter. But as a whole, it was hard to track down, and it really did not give you a good picture of what was happening. So I amassed that. Then I said I needed to have documentation. I needed some piece of documentation that would validate my investigation at the National Archives, because I felt that in order to really pursue this, I needed to find authentic documentation, not just rely on other author or researchers' work.
Sure.
So what I did, I contacted historian researchers Barry Greenwood and Jan Aldridge. Jan Aldridge, your listeners may know, was, or still is, the director of Project 1947.
Mm-hmm.
And Barry Greenwood is a well-known historian on the UFO phenomenon going back many years. I'd say in the 1960s, if I have it correctly. I hope I am right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked them if they had any key documentation that would that I could really get on my feet and running to determine where I needed to go. So basically what I received was information regarding the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. And that information had to do a lot with what they call the Foo Fighter sighting.
Sure.
So I looked at that and realized, well, there were very large gaps, and there was in actuality very little documentation, official documentation that I could see.
Mm-hmm.
But because of what I had in my hands at the time, I said, well, I'll just go into the record groups at the archives and look for myself, find these same reports, and then just backtrack and just see what I can find. And before even going that far, I wanted something that really showed me that there was a definite phenomenon that existed during the war, and it was actually acknowledged by official authorities.
Right.
And that came with the Robertson Panel report. And, of course, the Robertson Panel had convened in Washington, D.C. in January 1953 to determine if UFOs were a national security threat. There was a real concern that if the UFO phenomenon was used as propaganda, the Soviet Union could actually clog the communication lines with, let's say, a fake UFO sighting, whatever they determine, and then launch a low-altitude intercontraballistic missile strike in the U.S.
Sure.
And so I determined that that report was really the groundwork that kept me to pursue this investigation, because within it there was a section called On Lack of Danger, specific to World War II, and I quote, "If the term flying saucers had been popular in 1943 through 1945, these objects would have been so labeled." I was absolutely startled by that statement and decided that, well, that was coming out of the CIA. Of course, the report itself said that the phenomena was probably meteorological, celestial phenomena, or misidentifications.
Sure.
But the fact that they put that statement in there indicated to me that something resembled the flying saucers that were being seen post-war. Because that term did not exist until post-war. And it was, of course, it was applied to the unconventional aircraft that were being seen around the country, the United States, and around the world. Circular aircraft that displayed unconventional aerodynamic activity. And so I felt, well, that definitely segregated it from celestial or meteorological phenomena. There was definitely something there, but the report itself seemed to be very, very vague and watered down. But it was enough to get me going. So from 1999 to 2003, I went to the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, and weekly did a search through all the record groups of the Army Air Force, the Office of Scientific Research and Development, the U.S. Army,